Hello, and welcome to Baha'i Blogcast, with me, your host, Rainn Wilson. This is where I interview members of the Baha'i faith and other friends from all over the world about their hearts and minds and souls, their spiritual journeys, what they're interested in, and what makes them tick. Enjoy. Hello there, Baha'i Blogcast. Well, this is a very special episode. Super thrilled to be beaming this conversation into your earbones from Cottonwood, Arizona, and the Best Western Hotel, room 214, in case you want to track us down. It's across the street from the Dunkin' Donuts. And I'm here with my new dear friend and Baha'i brother, Batani Wayne Wilson. We got to know each other through an interesting set of circumstances, but I'm so excited to be out here in Arizona, and we're going to be visiting his work with K Native Action later tonight and tomorrow out on the Navajo Reservation, kind of between Arizona and New Mexico, Four Corners area. So, Wayne, thanks for having me in room 214 at the Best Western.
It's good to be here in Cottonwood, Arizona. Yate, she Batani Schlido, Toy Linear, the Shija, Toricini, the Shichero, Sina, Gini, the Shinale, Anlate, Isi Ada on a shadow. Shije da Shijini, Wayne Wilson, the Shijinonde, but only Wayne Wilson, the A without a Shij, the Shije, a without being conditioner. I just want to say thank you for allowing me to share in both English and Navajo. I just explained that I'm a Folded Arms clan, born for the two waters that flow together clan, and Bitterwater is my maternal grandparent, and my paternal grandparent is Blackstreet on the Running Tree clan. And I'm originally from Pine Springs, and my name is Wayne Wilson. And I just wanted to share like a little bit of where I'm from, where I come from Pine Springs. Pine Springs, Arizona, on the Navajo Nation is they, I guess, back in 1962 is where they had the first the council fire, Baha'i council fire there, and a lot of my relatives became Baha'is at that time. And there's like three of my uncles, they're late uncles. There's Franklin Khan, the late Ben Khan, and the late Chester Khan. They were all Baha'is before me, and they were the ones that taught me about the Baha'i faith. And that's kind of how I was able to, I guess, participate. And then also it was part of my transition from living in Pine Springs. I grew up in Pine Springs, and then I used to herd sheep, and I also went to boarding school in Pine Springs boarding school, and also Fort Wingate boarding school. And so it was mainly we had to do the Catholic, go to Catholic Mass on Sunday, and participate in the Catholicism, and that was kind of like how it was forced on me. So that was. It was kind of hard for me, but then later on I decided to be a Baha'i. That was like in 90, 91, around that time.
Oh, that's great. And for those, we have a lot of listeners from all over the world. Like, what would, as you were describing it, what would a Baha'i council fire in 1962, and I grew up a Baha'i kid in Seattle area, and I heard about the Khans, Chester Khan, and they were kind of very well-known Baha'i teachers and spiritual leaders. But what would that council fire have been like? What would have happened there? I know you were probably there, but what can you tell us about that event?
Well, from what I've heard from another uncle, Alfred Khan, and then also the photos that I've seen, there was quite a few people that pioneers that came. They came in a bus, and they camped out right there in Pine Springs, right by the community. They call it the community center, but it was like back at that time was recognized as a Pine Springs chapter. So they call it the old Pine Springs chapter building. But everybody camped out around that area, and they all had had a talk, and they made I remember one of the highlights was the women getting together and cooking a cake, cornmeal cake in the ground as part of that celebration and part of that coming together of that many people. I mean, it was over 100 100 people. There's probably about maybe close to 400 people. I mean, Navajo people, because they were all, there was a person that rode around on a horse and were telling people that, they were invited to come to the council fire. And so, like I said, they all camped out in the different areas.
And what would have happened at the council fire?
Well, it was to share the message of the Bob and Baha'u'llah, that they had come to bring the message of God and to share and to come together as humanity, recognizing each other as one family, and the human family, of course, and so that concept is kind of like very similar to the Navajo teaching and way of life, and to recognize each other as family, because when sometimes that's how the Navajo were able to keep going, as far as like when the Navajos went on the long walk, a lot of families were separated. So what had happened was that, I guess, the clan system kicked in, that changing woman established for the Navajo people was that's the reason why we have clans. We have 4 clans. So if one of us goes astray and we come across another person and they're the same clan, so they just automatically adopt each other. So that's kind of how it all how that works as far as recognizing family. And that's that when we talk about keh, or native action. The word keh is part having to do with peaceful family relationships. So that was what they were practicing when they came together. So that's very close to how the Baha'i faith recognized. And at that time they weren't forceful, at least the way I understood it. Like for me, when I was mentioning the boarding school, we had to go to the church, and I think the main part that I enjoyed was going back in between, going for the walk, because the church was quite a ways, at least about maybe a quarter mile to a half mile to walk, and then it was different, because what I was raised up, my family, my mother and my father were alcoholics, and I just remember when I was a kid, being with my brother and my sister in the car, and they were parked at the liquor store or the bar, and we were in the back of the car, and there was no place. We just had to stay in the car, and until my sister wanted to go home, and she would have to go in to tell them to come out, and we wanted to go home. So there were several times where, I think it was like twice, we got into a car accident, and one was pretty bad because my mother got hurt and almost went through the window shield of the vehicle, and she had a scar across her face. So after that, my grandmother said, "No more. That's enough." She told my father that you need to go. We don't want our family members to pass away. So it just kind of like split the family. And then, but there was I noticed there was domestic violence too. Back then, it wasn't recognized as child abuse or child neglect, or domestic violence. That there was no such thing back then. But now they're really on top of it. So like what I've seen is the way things are. They really get on you for just like leaving the child. And then when after that, my grandmother raised me. So I was raised by my grandmother and her brother. He was a medicine man. So his name was John Burnside, and he would come around and do ceremony. So we would prepare the building or the hogan for whoever was going to have a prayer, or they say doings or ceremony for that patient.
And what's a hogan?
A hogan is usually a round building or an octagon building, and that's where they have, I guess you could say it's what the Baha'is call something.
Majra Kal Azkar.
Yeah. It's similar
place
to that
of gathering.
Yeah, place of gathering, ceremony, eating, just to get together. So that's what that building represented for us. And in the Hogan is everything's connected, or it reflects back into the universe. When you enter the Hogan, you go to your left and you go clockwise, because on this area or this part of the hemisphere, the way the sun comes to the east, and it goes around to the south, and then all the way to the west. So it's all based on the different times of the day, and are all based on like the spring, the summer, the fall, and the winter. So the east would represent the spring, and then the south would represent the summer, and then the west would represent the fall, and then the north would represent the winter. So by going around in that hogan, you're acknowledging those four quadrants, and also the four directions and the four seasons. So that's that, and then the fire that's in the center of the hogan represents Polaris. So when we go around in the hogan, that's how we reflect, and that's how I see the manifestations of God, and also like the Baba Mahala, how we're supposed to be reflecting back into the universe the way we're through prayer and fasting and meditation. We're not doing that anymore. We're kind of like straying from it. So it seemed like we're kind of like being put back onto this, or the things that we're supposed to be doing. At least like when you read the writings or prayers, it kind of like gets you back on that. It's like a foundation to go by. So that's kind of how I'm understanding their writings and the prayers, you know. And then also looking at like within our own indigenous culture and our own through our language, it's like looking in what was the true essence of who we are as Diné or Navajo people or five-finger earth surface people, and who were the holy people. You know, when we say holy people, they're the ones that were here before us, and they left behind a set of instructions on how to live in beauty, balance, and harmony. That beauty, balance, and harmony is in one word, and we call it hojon, and hojon is an all-encompassing word. So it's like the way the sphere of the earth, or the sphere, and how everything's going in a circle. So, and hojo is part of that, and then it extends beyond more. So it's a very ancient word, but it's very powerful. And when we sing and chant, you know, like there's a word that means everything in existence is beautiful. It's just that it's how we live our life. You know, are we going to live it in beauty, or are we going to live it in chaos, or are we going to be in balance? So it's the balance between the beauty and the chaos. So that's how we're living, supposed to be living our life. At least that's the way my grandmother and my grandfather, they explained it to me like that when I was little.
That's so beautiful. And isn't there that Navajo phrase about walking with beauty?
Yeah. So there's a prayer, Kudo Hojondo. You know, it's like saying, from here, from where I'm going, from where my next step, it's going to be beautiful. So we say Kudo Hojondo. Then we say Shadagi Hojongo. Shikere hojondo, shiket ate hojondo, shitsit aje teko hojondo, taats hoshinago hojondo. So what I'm saying is, from here where I am, where I'm standing, or where I'm walking forward, is going to be beautiful, and then it'll be beauty before me, beauty behind me, beauty below my feet upon Mother Earth, and then beauty above my head all the way up into the universe, and then beauty all the way around. So and then they say all is beautiful, all is beautiful, all is beautiful. So that prayer that brings everything together when you say that prayer.
That's beautiful. And are there more links between the Baha'i prayers and the Navajo prayers? And also, what are the connections that you find between the Baha'i teachings and the traditional spiritual teachings of the Navajo?
Well, like I said, this prayer that I'm sharing with you is very similar to the protection prayer that the Bob said with that part of, immeasurably exalted art thou, Lord, protecteth what lieth in front of us, behind us, above our head, on our right, on our left, below our feet, and every other side which we are exposed. That prayer is very close to the prayer I just said, because we're saying beauty before me, beauty behind me. But when we say beauty, we're also encompassing the protection part of it, because with in the Navajo teaching, Navajo philosophy, there's the male and female essence. The male represents protection, and the female represents blessing. So those two go hand in hand. And what ties those two together in the Navajo language, they talk about sa'ahnagay bikehojon, sa'ahnagay shki bikehojon ated, or you can say sa'ahnagay bikehojon ba'ad. So when I'm saying those words, I'm saying long life, or old age, boy, or male, masculine, and then bikahojon is that life, long life, beautiful long life, girl or female essence. So it's that male female balance here on Earth. That's the way everything is, like these plants, the who we are as humanity, and then the animals. So it's everything's male female. At least that's how they recognize it. So when we sing those, like that word, that's where I saw, for me as a Dene or a Navajo, when they talk about the Bob and Mahala, the Bob would be Sa'an, and then the Mahala would be Bikahojon. You know, when you talk to twin manifestations to the elderly or people here, they don't understand. But when you say Alke na Ashe or Nakina Ashe, when you say that to them, you're talking about the primordial pairs, they'll understand. Because the reason why I'm saying that is the Earth and the Moon are considered to be Alke na Ashe because they follow each other all the time. You know, when you see them in the sky, they're two pairs. I'm talking about, yes, they're actual people, but the essence behind them, or you could say that part of the attributes, the male female essence, or they say divine masculine, divine feminine. That is what I was referring to, because when you go deeper in I guess you could say our holy people, there was first calling God. There's a ceremony. This is from the 9-night ceremony. There's first calling God, or they call it first house God, and then there's talking God. Their name is Hashche Yalkin, Hashche Wu. Those two were here long before. In our stories, in our emergent stories, they talk about them being a part of the development of the earth when it started, before humanity came into existence. They were here, and so they helped, I guess you could say, they helped the Great Spirit in developing how humanity will live here on this earth. So they were here, and those two are the only two that I was really looking into. There's some people talk about Monster Slayer and Childborn in the Water, who were twin warriors that help purify this land because of humanity going astray, and then they were creating these demons, monsters, sicknesses, chaos. It's like it started devouring humanity, killing humanity, and they were trying to figure out, well, we have to figure out how humanity can live in beauty and harmony. So how can we do this? So that's when they chose Changing Woman, who was like our mother, the mother of humanity, who then became the earth. So Changing Woman has two names. She had, they call her White Shell Woman or Changing Woman. But then I've heard another version of them saying White Shell Changing Woman. So she was White Shell when she was from a little girl to teenage, and then from teenage growing to an older woman. So that's how she became Changing Woman. So it's like these different parts of the woman, or a woman when she becomes from a childhood to teenage, then all the way to and like an older woman. So they recognize that. So that when they chose her, she raised the Monster Slayer and Childborn in the Water, and that's how. And they were the ones that came and had to kill off all these monsters and make it habitable for humanity to live and to be able to be where we're at right now, I guess, for technology. So that's kind of how deep that it goes, you know, with the culture and recognition, the recognition of these two holy figures. Those two holy figures, we use them in sand painting too. So but their name is Hashem. But for me, that's how I see them. I see them as that they have they were here long before. They're still here, and then they're also continuing on.
Which ties in perfectly with the Baha'i concept of progressive revelation, right?
Yeah, and then in the Navajo teaching, they talk about emergence, that we emerged from the dark world, and then we emerged into the blue world, the yellow world, then the white world. Then now they're saying there's the fifth world. That was 4. So then there's 5, And the fifth world is considered to be the glittering world that we're in right now, because everything glitters, because of the technology. So they say we've merged into the fifth world. So in those different worlds, everybody was living right, but then somewhere along the line they started going astray. So those different worlds were destroyed, either by water or fire or air, or something more catastrophic. And then, of course, the Pangea separated, and so you have the different countries, and then they're all on different sides of the hemisphere. So that's kind of how I'm understanding. And then how it goes. Our stories go pretty far back. I just share the similarities with how I see the Bab and Baha'u'llah as to seeing first calling God and first talking God. So it's there. I guess when I talk about Ketna Ashe or Nakina Ashe, Ketna Ashe means one who goes. They both travel together like that. So that's what I'm talking about. And then the other one is Nakina Ashe, means they're coming in pairs. So they're considered to be primordial pairs. And so it's not just like that for the Neb. There's other cultures that I've looked and I said, wow, it's amazing to see that the East India, they have their own two brothers, warrior brothers. And then the Mayans and the Aztec, they have their own two warrior brothers. So it's like they have these primordial pairs all around the world.
Wow. Wow, that is, that goes into a deep spiritual mythology. I know that you've done some work with the great Baha'i scholar Christopher Buck, who we have to get on the show here one of these days, and Kevin Locke has also worked with Christopher Buck, kind of, and on a lot of writings on Baha'i teachings and on Wilmette Institute about the ways that native, indigenous spiritual traditions line up with some of these core Baha'i teachings and beliefs, especially around progressive revelation and just the writings, legends, and incredible wisdom of these great spiritual teachers that have come through all the different regions and tribes and areas of native North America throughout the millennia. What else has your studies around that unearthed?
So when I know, like with Christopher Buck, he did a introduction, and then we started getting into talking about indigenous spiritual teachers, manifestations of God. So yeah, we got into that, and that's what I was sharing with him, or what I just shared with you about these two holy figures that are ancient from way back. And then it's amazing to see that even now to this day they still recognize them, but they have a different name, but they're still the same station. At least that's kind of how I'm viewing it. And so when we talk about progressive revelation, you got the mineral kingdom, then the plant kingdom, the animal kingdom, the human kingdom, and then there's the spirit. So in through that, I guess that's part of the for us we say emergence, because in the dark world we emerged from the darkness and gradually coming into the light. So it's like the dark world would be the mineral, and then it'll be like as you go from the plant to the animal, and then the human. So that's kind of how we evolved in that way. So some of them say, it's part of Darwinism, but it's like, yes, little. But we didn't come from apes, we're actually human people, because we're the only people that can communicate through language, and we have our own phenomena, how we think, our conscious and subconscious. It's very, very unique from the other, like the insects, and then also the animals. So that's kind of how, at least that's the way it was expressed to me. So I don't know if I answered all.
No, you did. That's great. And we started this interview and we went right into some pretty deep philosophical and spiritual concepts. Thank you for sharing that, and I love that. I have to look more into that idea of the twin warriors and the twin brothers, and kind of in various spiritual traditions and mythology, and on how that aligns with the Bob and Baha'u'llah. That's really, I've never heard that before. It's really cool. But let's go back, because you talked about growing up and herding sheep on the reservation. I'd just love to know a little bit more about you personally, Wayne, and growing up there. What was it? Pine
Springs.
Pine Springs. And just tell me about your life. You shared that kind of really painful chapter about growing up in an alcoholic family, but I'd love to know kind of where your life journey took you, and how you got here, and then eventually we'll get more into K Native Action and the incredible service work that you've been doing. But first, I want to just get to know you a little better.
Okay. Well, I like I said, back in 1980 and then 90, that's when I was herding sheep, and I lived. When my parents passed away, and then my grandma passed away. She wasn't like a parent to me. And then my mother, I was like, first it was my grandmother passed away, then it was my mother, then my father. So it's like from, I think it was 76 to 1980. Within that time span, that's when they passed away. But then I was raised with my aunt, Elizabeth Bennett and Robert Bennett. They raised me, and then they had their kids, which were my cousins. And that was very painful because I went through abuse from one particular person, but it's taken a long time. So I didn't really feel part of that, like I was part of that family. I herded sheep, and helped feed the horses and the cows, and then I went to school in Sanders Elementary, and then also Valley High School, and that's where I graduated in Sanders. And then I used to go to the Native American Baha'i Institute, which is also, they call it NABI, and that's when Ben Kahn, the late Ben Kahn, and Chester Kahn used to come around, and they helped build that place, and Lorraine Kahn, who was also administrator, who oversaw the Native American Baha'i Institute, Jeff Kiley. So part of my what happened to me was I was with my cousin, and he was I guess you could say he was an alcoholic, but he was Baha'i. So I was trying to tell him we needed to start looking more into the faith, but it seemed like he was being pulled away. So one day, him and we were drinking. I got out. I just told him I wanted to get out and go to I just wanted to get out, and he wouldn't let me out. So I was proceeding to get out of the vehicle while it was still moving. And then he just slammed on the brake, and I got out. He tried to give me another beer. I said, no, I don't want it. I'm done. So I left, and I got out, and I started walking down the road. And then not knowing what time of day it was, and then I ended up walking over to the Native American Baha'i Institute, and so that's where everything started, going the opposite direction as far as living a partying life and a carefree life. So and then I went to the Baha'i Institute and talked to Jeff Kiley was there at the time, and he told me, well, we don't let people sleep here, but you can stay over at the Prayer Hogan. So I went to the Prayer Hogan and I stayed the night. But when I was there, I prayed about all the things that I'm going through and what where I'm at, and just let it all go. And next thing you know, it was kind of like straightening myself out and cleaning myself up and making sure, I said, from here on I got to start figure out what I need to do. So it was like a year went by, and I was working on myself and my sobriety, and then I started helping there at the Native American Baha'i Institute. They were talking about service, how you do service, and I didn't understand what service, but then the very first AA that I went to was there at the Prayer Hogan. It was all done in Navajo. As the most unique thing that I ever saw was this, to go through the 12-step program all in Navajo.
Wow.
I never seen it happen anywhere else but there.
Wow.
So there's a guy.
Is the big book translated into Navajo?
Well, actually, it was all in English, but our whole conversation that we had was all in Navajo. So we would read the scripture in English, and then we would like kind of like deepen on it in Navajo. So our response would be in Navajo on what they're actually saying about, with the 12-step program. So it was very, very interesting. And then my uncle attended that meeting. He was the Navajo code talker, original. One of the
wow.
Yeah, his name was.
And for people that don't know about the Navajo code talkers, can you tell them a little bit about that?
Okay, well, the Navajo code talker, like my uncle, Wilsey Bitsy was his name. He was one of the clerk of the codes, and so they used the Navajo language in the Pacific War as they were going from the one island to the next island. So they were using the Navajo language on the radio wave to relay messages so that the Japanese or whoever wouldn't decipher the information. And so they were using the Navajo language back and forth to share where they're at, their location, and also the coordinates of where they were shooting the mortars, so they wouldn't be shooting them, on their own people, on their own army. So they were being successful using the Navajo language.
Okay.
So that's how the Navajo code. So my uncle was one of them, Navajo code talker, and he's the one. He played a major role. So he was there at that AA meeting, and then also, from there on, we started to get to know each other more and more, and he also helped me get into the powwow, dancing in the powwow. So he just told me there's a lot of things that are going to be happening to you, so you have to be aware of these. He kind of gave me a heads up on all, and everything that he was telling me is started falling into place. Like to get a whole eagle, a golden eagle. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So he prayed about me going to Michigan, going to school. He told me he went to school in Ann Arbor, got his degree, and so he was telling me that Michigan. He's been to Michigan, so it was interesting. Yeah, being with him, Wilsey Bitsy. He played he was like a spiritual guide to some extent. He was like an elder, so he shared a lot, and so I used to help him out all the time. Drive him to places, take him, get food for him, or so. That whole part I was sharing about service, I started learning through AA that when you serve people, it kind of helps you out, and then it helps them out. So, and then he also explained how that process worked. My uncle Wilsey, he explained how this is why you help people. So when you need help, then somebody will help you. So that's kind of how far this service thing goes. And then and with like in the faith, they talk about doing service. Whether if it's cleaning somebody's yard or digging a hole for an outhouse or just doing whatever, cleaning for them.
Work in the spirit of service is the highest worship.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I didn't realize it until now. I understand now more and more about what service is more. And so, but when I started a year ago, when the pandemic when they said it's a pandemic, that's where I already had the food, because something kept telling me I had a instinct. Something kept telling me you need to start saving food. So I had in our apartment where it was stacks of cases of food, and I was like, man, I gotta get rid of this food. I gotta figure out who needs it. So I started going around and I was giving it out, and then all of a sudden they said it's a pandemic, and so I was like, oh no, here we go. It's gonna get bigger. There's gonna be more people. So I went back to the St. Mary's food bank in Albuquerque, and I started getting more food, and then someone just told me need to start getting more items like men and women's personal hygiene products, cleaning supplies, food, more food, at least non-perishable foods. So that's kind of how. And then the whole issue of water, how they were saying you need to wash your hands, and I was like, well, there's people out there that don't have running water, and they have to haul their water, and so I was like, wow, it's getting more and more challenging. So I decided, we started with giving out cases of water, and then we switched from that to hauling water, and then some people, all they had were 5-gallon buckets or the 5-gallon containers. So that's where we decided to get into barrels and distributing out 55-gallon barrels or 60 gallons, 30 gallons, 15 gallons, all the way down to 5 gallon. So it's like we were through Accomplice, and then also with Kelly Beck from New Jersey.
Well, we got to acknowledge the fact that Kelly Beck from New Jersey is sitting in the corner of this. Say hi, Kelly.
Hello. Brooklyn, by the way. Brooklyn.
Okay.
But close.
Not New Jersey?
Not New Jersey.
Yeah,
no offense, New Jersey. But it's Brooklyn.
Okay. So she helped us, and we were able to, with, what was Olga's?
Antinaco.
Antinaco. There's a couple others like she runs, right? It's a nonprofit. But anyway, we started collaborating, and then I started collaborating with Chris from...
that's how I met you, was Chris Cullen from Seattle, who does a lot of work with Native peoples, and he kept telling me about, you got to meet this guy, Wayne Wilson. I'm telling you, you just got to meet this guy. He just spends all his time being of service, hauling water. He talked about Kelly, like they're starting a thing, you got to help him out. And so that's how I got to know you. We did a big online fundraiser to get you a truck to be able to haul this water out to some remote locations. And that's why we're here, to visit you and check out some of your work, deliver some food, and hang out at the Best Western.
So that's kind of how this has all been working. There's a lot of other people that were involved that have donated. There's just so many people I think about. There's several groups, like there's the Christopher Cullen, and there's a group from two groups from California that donated. There's several. So many people, and then of course there's you that helped, and then just other people, like there's some other Navajos that pitched in and helped as far as like going out and what I was trying to do is collaborate with all these different groups. So right now we've been working with Flagstaff Mutual Aid from Flagstaff, and what was the other one? Was Navajo Medicine Healers. It's a group that they only deliver to the medicine men or people that do the ceremony. They have their families, so I kind of saw where they're at. So, and then part of what we're doing too is testing the water, because there's families out there that are using livestock water for windmills, water pumps, and so what we've been doing is testing them to see what the level is from 1 to 6. So if it's,
and some of the water's been polluted from a lot of the uranium mining, is that right?
Yeah.
And mining on the reservation?
Yeah, there's the uranium mining, and then there's also the coal mining. Now today they're doing the
fracking?
Fracking, yeah. That's and the chemicals they use to put back into the ground is going into the springs. That's what they're really worried about. The Navajos are worried about those chemicals going into the spring water. So yeah, that's kind of, those are some of the challenges. And then also I just got my second shot, so I got myself
You're inoculated. Okay.
Yeah. So I'm doing good now. I'm doing better. It's been a challenge though. It's been very stressful, but I just kept going. Plugging away, just keep going. I said, let's go as long as I can. I even risked myself. There's a couple of times that we had to deliver to people that were infected by COVID, and it just took precautions. Our method would be put a table out, and we'll give you your supplies, and then you can wipe them down. But now there's the group. They usually wipe them down before we give it to them. But I usually tell them, well, you can wipe it down, before you use it. Whatever food packages.
And COVID hit the Navajo reservation maybe the worst in the United States. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's because families like on the Navajo Nation, we all live in clustered housings. And so the families are really tight-knit because, like I said, it's like a clan. We all live in close community. If it's a big family, they're all in one area. Like when I went out to one particular place, away from the main community, there was a whole another community, and there was like over about 20, 30 people all living in one area. So if one person gets sick, then they don't even know. They just pass it on, whether if it's like talking or touching, shaking hands. I mean, that was the hard part, is not being able to shake somebody's hand, because that's how you're respectful to your elder, by shaking. So it's hard because they want to stick their hand out, but then they don't want to. They think about it and they say, "Oh, we can't shake hands, or we can't come together as we did before. Like, we get together and have a meal and have a conversation and all. We can't do that anymore." So.
And a lot of these deliveries that you do, I was interested to find out that a good third of the reservation population kind of live off the grid.
Yeah. So there's families out there that don't have running water, or they don't have electricity. There's some that don't have cars. They usually catch a ride. They use the extended family to give them a ride, or they'll bring food back for them. But there's just some that they don't have no income. It's tough out there, because I was one of those people. I was on foot for a while, for a long while. But now and then I have had like several vehicles.